This is probably one of the biggest struggles for anybody in the divorce process. Your pride is one of the number one things that can work against you. Trying to justify your behaviors, that's a prideful, that's rooted in pride.
Yeah.
When I'm being defensive and I'm trying to justify, well, if you say, well, you yelled at me. Well, I yelled at you because you were being such a jerk.
Right.
That's a prideful response.
And I was such a jerk because you keep yelling at me.
That's a prideful response because, I'm saying, well, it's not my fault that.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not accepting responsibility. I'm blaming you for it. Here's the thing about the pride issue. This is the part that's so interesting to me, is you can see this start to really come into play toward the closer people get to a divorce. And it's like something that's been there through the whole marriage, but it just sort of escalated. And then they get to the point where they're on the brink of divorce and still nobody will stop being prideful. And then they go through the divorce and that continues. The court doesn't like it. It hurts your post-divorce relationship. So it's, you're harboring resentment toward the other person. You're reacting with pride. And we all do this we all do this. This is a natural, normal human tendency. I'm not saying you're any different than anybody else. I'm saying you have to be aware of this before you can do something to stop it or change it.
So the first step is to be aware that this is kicking you in the shins of your self-esteem.
Right. And this is hard to lay down.
It's almost impossible to stop doing that by just sheer willpower.
Yes.
You can't just go, I'm going to lay that aside.
Right.
Because as soon as he says the next thing, you're going to be back in that same place. I find that the kind of the therapeutic model of the inner child is kind of a helpful way to think about what's happening here. And that is, you have this little person inside of you that's vulnerable and that is subject to hurt and wants to think they're a good boy or a good little girl. And somebody says something to you that paints you in a bad light. Your outer protector comes out. This other person comes out with a sword and says, no further.
Right.
This is, I'm going to protect this little child.
Right.
And it's very hard to tell that person to sheath their dagger because that little person inside is very easily hurt.
And then when you are going through a divorce, the last person you want to be vulnerable to is your ex.
That's true.
And so it kind of escalates that issue. And so I agree with you that you usually can't just sheer willpower it. But what you do is, things we talked about last episode with the 5-year vision, which is start retraining your mind in specific ways. And so that looks different for everybody. For some people, that's, some people it's reading books and getting more educated around it. Some people it's, listening to doing meditations, listening to podcasts. I tend to listen to, upbeat, positive, influencers that resonate with me. Some people it means, a therapist or a coach in some fashion. I would say this is a lot of what I work on with coaching clients is just trying to keep their perspective turned towards a positive thing. And not that there's not issues with the other person, there is. But like you said, if you can start to understand that comes from that person's life experiences or childhood experiences or traumas or whatever they've been through, right, it's a lot easier to have some grace and to be more sympathetic.
I would say my advice too would be to not have intimate conversations of any type.
Right.
Because, frankly, it doesn't matter anymore.
Right. Who did what to whom is irrelevant.
Right. That's true.
Right. But we all have that feeling of wanting to be justified, you know, and I say this to my boys a lot with their current marriages, you know, when they've hit hiccups and things, I'll say, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy?
Yeah.
Because the pride issue comes in, I want to be right. You know, I want to feel like a good person. I want to be a better person than them. I want to, you know, whatever.
And that's the payoff.
And that's the payoff in it. But that doesn't lead to happiness. And this is true in all relationships, not just divorce. It's just that you're in a situation where it's magnified, you know, when you're going through a divorce. But, you know, even in a marriage, this is true. And so if you can, you know, if you're in a new relationship or you're, you know, or anything, or you're still in your marriage and you don't know if it's going to end, I think this is where you start, because if one person can start to pull the wall down, then it becomes recoverable if you're still in the marriage. If you're not in the marriage and you're headed through divorce, then your job is to put that wall up and protect you from these bullets from the other side, so that you don't end up in this frame of mind.
Right, and that's what people do is they, a lot of our advice, you know, when we have somebody that sends nasty grams, is some will block them.
Yeah.
Block them.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't do that because then they won't be able, you know, what if there's an emergency or something? There never is an emergency.
It's rare.
It's pretty rare. Yeah. If there is an emergency, you should take their call. But it takes a strong person to put up that wall and say, I'm not going to have an under the surface conversation of any type with you.
Right.
It's not because I hate you or because you're a bad person. It's just because that's not our relationship anymore.
Well, because I need to protect myself. And I'd love to tell you there's some fairness or some kind of something in it, but it's really not. And so you have to start, you know, trying to work through those feelings as a separate measure, because at this point, this is a business transaction with the other person.
It is.
You know, and that's where you've got to keep your focus.
Right. And it's not so much swallowing your pride. It's more, you have to reframe it.
Right.
It's more of a reframing. We teach this all the time, that your feelings about things are based on the narrative that you tell yourself.
Right.
I'm the homemaker. I'm this, you know, and he retorted, well, I built that new room or whatever it was. Like, you know, he built the house or he did this or he did that. And all of that is a story that we tell ourselves.
Right.
Well, how about this story? I've been unhappy in this marriage for a year, and I need some financial help to get my new life started.
Right. Right. And that's going to be coming at it in a positive way and not based on how it negatively impacts the other person.
Correct.
Yeah. All right. So thanks for joining us. If you are seeing this on YouTube, watching the video version, please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. If you are listening to the audio version of the podcast, please rate and review us on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you're listening to us. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And we'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon, turn us to thousands.